The downtown office sector has seen ebb and flow the last several years, from historically low vacancy rates at the end of 2019 to the work from home mandates, and now these same companies summoning the come back to the office. All of this while global technology companies continue to increase their footprint here in Vancouver. Our guest today, Brayden Sangha, who works for Colliers, will be giving his perspective on the Vancouver office market and the trends that he's seeing. So Brayden, growing up around real estate from an early age, when did you decide you wanted to get into the real estate industry?
Yeah, growing up, my dad was building single-family homes. I think we moved about 16 times before I left for university, which is pretty crazy. I managed to work construction in the summers during high school and got an understanding of that side of the business. And then when I did my undergrad at UBCO, they didn't have any specific real estate program. So I ended up taking accounting and quickly learned after a summer internship that that wasn't for me. And then after graduating, I ended up taking a bunch of people out for coffees through my network, just try to understand what type of business I wanted to be involved in, and where my limited skill set would be most applicable. And then that ended up being commercial real estate brokerage. Ended up interviewing with a few different firms and landed with Colliers and seemed to be a good fit.
Real, yeah. It seems all three of us, our dads were in real estate to start, and Taylor, like yourself, started up at Bear Mountain doing some heavy lifting as well. So kind of similar story. And when you did start working there as a commercial broker with Colliers, did you start in the office space?
We have Colliers is one of the bigger shops. I think we're the biggest in Canada and maybe the third or fourth biggest in the world. It's changing all the time, but we have this thing called the acceleration program, which essentially lets junior brokers get a taste for all the assets. So they get to meet with different specialists in each asset and get to work with them. And then there's also a rigorous training program. So some people come in and join a direct team, but for the most part, you're able to choose what you want to work with, and everybody kind of finds their fit after, 4 to 6 months.
That's cool that they let everyone kind of touch the different asset classes to kind of figure out what's maybe of interest and maybe what's not of interest for them. And as we were talking about earlier there before the call started, you were chatting about the weekly calls and how each different asset class, retail, office, investment, all of that's on a weekly call, and you still have the ability to tune into those and keep up to date and informed on those different ones. So yeah, it's interesting totally how they let you guys kind of find your way, for lack of a better description. And in the intro to this call here, I talked about, from record vacancy lows or historic lows to then the work from home mandate, and now companies are bringing people back into the office. What are you seeing right now in downtown Vancouver in terms of sales activity and leasing activity in the office space?
Yeah, in terms of office space, we've seen a steady increase in demand as restrictions have eased and companies have implemented their return to office strategies. There's definitely been an uptick in occupancy and leasing activity. Prior to the pandemic, tech was the biggest demand and the cool hot trend for office demand, but we've really seen a big push from professional services. A lot of these companies, lawyers, accountants, have hired a lot of people during the pandemic, and they've onboarded remotely, and now these companies have started to take up more space, so they're able to bring these people in and actually give them proper training. And then on the sales side, I think in our Q1 report, the average price per square foot was just over $1,000 per square foot for office space. We've seen lots of pre-sale projects come up in the Mount Pleasant area, and most of those projects have been selling out prior to completion.
Cool. Yeah, it's especially from our side of things, with working with a lot of investors. It's interesting for myself personally, just understanding office, retail, and that side of things. It is being very similar comparison as to condos and the pre-sales. It sounds like, and some of your buyers and your clients, are most of them purchasing for personal use, or are some of your clients looking at this as an investment as well?
Yeah, It's usually a mix of both and a case by case basis. Um, with companies like tech companies often won't purchase space because their headcount is so volatile, whereas companies that have been around for a while or have pretty stagnant growth, they're able to actually become owner users in the space that they purchase.
It's good perspective. That's interesting standpoint there about, maybe more higher growth companies that experience a little more, as you said, volatility. Signing on the dotted line for something to purchase might be, not as smart of a decision. Whereas companies who are, slow and steady, more kind of boring businesses, maybe decide to take some property under the belt there.
Yeah.
And the whole work from home standpoint, what impact did this have on the office space? Were people subleasing existing space? What did this do to the vacancy levels, and how is this recovered as these companies have put in their return to office mandates?
Yeah, that's a great question, and everybody wants to talk about office space right now. Prior to the pandemic, Vancouver had North America's lowest office vacancy rate, and 2 years later, little has actually changed. We still do. Most companies were able to weather the storm, but there's definitely been a transition to a hybrid work model. Employers have been really hard pressed to attract and retain talent and actually bring that talent into the office. So companies are trying to make their spaces more inviting, where people actually want to come to work and stay at work rather than having to come to the office because it was mandated. So that being said, tightly packed cubicles are on their way out, and more spacious lounge style open seating plans are becoming more common. And people want to collaborate. People want to be around their colleagues. A lot of people haven't seen each other in years. Some people haven't even met each other, like new hires and whatnot. So yeah, that's generally been the trend.
Yeah, and kind of conversations with other friends and colleagues going back into office is they kind of got that luxury of working from home. They like some of the luxuries of being in the office. So yeah, finding that hybrid and a bit of flexibility is going to be definitely key for those employers. And obviously, you touched on it was a very low vacancy before COVID, and similar song now. So it doesn't really look like companies ever left, and it seems like they're here to stay. So kind of my next question would be, have workspaces like WeWorks impacted the office market?
Yeah, so the two biggest companies we have in our market are WeWork and Regis, and then there's a few other small companies that are in the Vancouver market as well. The biggest value that these co-working options offer is flexibility. So companies can come into the space, rent on a month-to-month basis, and these spaces are fully serviced. And there's other companies working there that they can collaborate with. Sometimes it can be a negative because employees get poached from one another. But I've definitely thought of co-working as a positive to our market because it allows early stage companies to have the ultimate flexibility as they grow and expand. Generally, smaller new companies will look at taking a sublease option, which can range from 1+ years, but sometimes that doesn't work. So they look at this option where it can be fully serviced and just a month-to-month agreement.
Be a tough bounce losing your head of marketing to a conversation at the free coffee dispensary there at the WeWork. Hey, just
yeah, exactly.
Next thing you know, your marketing person's been poached.
I'd say most of the companies that are operating in the co-working spaces generally have 10 employees or less. They're pretty tightly packed offices, so once you get over that number, you're kind of sitting on one another, so it doesn't make as much sense.
So if I'm a tenant out now looking for office space in downtown Vancouver, how does leasing all work? Like there's the price per square foot rent, who pays for utilities? If I want to do some tenant improvements to the property, do I pay for those or the landlord? Like how does pricing and all of this structure work in office leasing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the most common lease we have is called a triple net lease. which is broken into two parts. There's the net rent, which is also referred to as the basic rent or minimum rent. This is the landlord's revenue, and it's a fixed number that's agreed to in the actual lease. And then the second part of a triple net lease is the additional rent, which generally includes the tenant's proportionate share of property taxes, common area maintenance, insurance, operating costs, and utilities. This part of the rent is variable. The landlord will generally complete an estimate each fiscal year and then reconcile the difference at the end of each year based on the actual amounts versus the estimate. And then to your question about utilities, these fall onto the tenant. They're either billed into the additional rent, or they're actually charged to the tenant either directly or indirectly. And then to your question about tenant improvements, this is a case-by-case basis. It can be done by the landlord or the tenant. Some landlords have in-house contractors that can be really efficient, and they'll offer turnkey suites. So what that means is essentially tenants can just come in with the key and move right in with their furniture. But some tenants actually prefer to hire a designer and a contractor and complete their own renovations. Generally, tenants will have to spend capital on improvements. The landlord will contribute to that with a tenant improvement allowance, or maybe offset some of the costs with free rent. But we've seen a huge increase in construction costs and timelines with permits with the city. So the demand for move-in ready plug-and-play space has dramatically increased in the last couple of years.
Very nice. Yeah. And with a lot of developments like that going up in Vancouver, maybe just talk about some of the AAA buildings like Amazon and Stack coming online.
Yeah, this building cycle's brought on some exciting new developments. To name a few, there's the Deloitte Summit, the Post Office, and then the Stack. The Post Office is where Amazon has secured about 1 million square feet. It's the two towers right on top of the old Post building.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's going to be a Loblaws, a fitness use, and then a high-end food hall in the retail portion. And this is expected to complete in early 2023. Amazon also has space just across the street on Dunsmuir and Homer there. So they have pretty much that entire block there. The Deloitte Summit is at Georgia and Homer, and that's Westbank's newest office building that literally just completed a couple of weeks ago. The major leases in that building are obviously Deloitte, Apple, and then Northeastern University. I think this is the most unique building of the bunch because it features a steel structure instead of concrete. So they were able to actually deliver the building in just over, I think, 2.5 years. And if you've seen it, it's pretty unique. It kind of looks like a Japanese lantern. It's essentially comprised of a system of 4-story cubes that stack around a central core. And then the Stack, which will actually become Vancouver's largest tower by square footage. That one's supposed to finish in 2023. And then the signed leases there are BDC, Ernst & Young, DLA Piper, and Blake's Law. So you're seeing a huge demand from these professional service firms, as you can tell with the pre-leasing.
Yeah.
My favorite part about them is just the aesthetic of them. You look at the Deloitte Tower there, the Stack, and then the Amazon one where it's coming through the old post office, just like the engineering, the architecture, and just the pure design and the aesthetic on these buildings that they're bringing on is quite incredible. And when companies move from, like you talked about the accounting firms that are coming in, are they then leasing out or selling off their existing office space? Who do you find's moving into that existing product when they then go into the brand new AAA stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of the bigger companies need to make decisions far out, obviously, because these leases are sometimes committed to 4 or 5 years out. So they generally tend to have their existing space expiry coincide with moving. So they'll have all of their renovations done. In other cases, they'll have, if they have an existing lease, they'll have to look to sublet that.
And what's a typical time frame for a lease of a big company? And is there limitations as to the increase in pricing, like year over year?
Yeah, that's a great question. The most of the deals done in the new buildings are usually 10 to 15 years, and then there's escalations in the rent. So the deals that were signed 5 years ago look really good right now, just because the rates have gone significantly up in the last 5 years.
That's an interesting standpoint from the residential side, where you're signing, one year leases for
Yeah.
your tenant, and the next thing you know, you're committed for 10 to 15 years with that tenant there. On the note of new developments and these projects coming into the Vancouver market, are there any upcoming developments that you're most excited about in the pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a ton of demand in the Mount Pleasant area. Seems like everybody wants to be around there. There's a lot of breweries, a lot of outdoor space, more boutique buildings, less corporate T-bar ceiling and carpeted floors. So that seems to be the new hip area. And developers are in the area, and they're building buildings. Like I mentioned, the pre-sales before, prior to completions. And there's also some buildings coming up for lease as well. One of my favorite new projects is called Archetype, which is the first development to combine strata office, industrial, retail, and residential all on one site. And that's being developed by Quadrille and Hungerford. And so I think it's 2025 completion. So pretty excited for that project.
Very cool.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing that one. And if anyone is looking to get a hold of you, lease, buy, or just has some questions on the office space there, what's the best way to contact you?
You can just Google my name, and my contact information usually pops up. I hope it's the first one. And then I'm also on Instagram. I have a business account called YBR_office space. And then you can also find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you coming and joining us here.
Of course, guys.